to the Brain Profits Podcast. Are you ready for the show? We are, so let's go. Welcome back to season 2, and this is an episode of the Brain Profits that you are listening to. I'm Doug Mapp, cognitive development professional and also an entrepreneur. And I'm here today with my partners. Partner number 1 is my man, Dr Douyon. What's going on, Doc?
What's going on? How are you?
I'm doing good. Normally we have the big introduction of your title. You can still get that off, but we are unfortunately out. Stacy's out today with a sick kid. We still got to record because the show must go on. But Dr. Philippe, we're going to talk about what you do and in regards to, why you wanted to jump on this podcast and start this podcast with us. For those who don't know, our podcast is to bring awareness to the reality that most people's brains control them. And if you're not aware that it controls you, you'll succumb to a lot of the failings that we often see, especially in this society that we're facing right now. And so we want to explore the challenges that exist for people, the different challenges or the symptoms that seem to arise. And then we also want to talk about not just the experiences that people have with these problems, but like what can be done, if anything, to help get them back in control, right? To inspire and empower people to take control of their brains so that they can control their life in the way in which they would like to. So anyways, with that being said, Philippe, man, why'd you want to join the show?
Yeah, so look, I'm Dr. Philippe Douyon. I'm the author of the book Neuroplasticity, Your Brain's Superpower, creator of the online course Take Charge of Your Brain. And for me, it was really about teaching people how their brains are constantly evolving and they're in control of how their brains evolve, right? I mean, we used to think that like our brains are pretty static. And what we've realized is that our brains are really a dynamic place. Our brains respond to everything, every thought we have, every new experience we have, every time that we take an action, right? Our brain is changing according to that. And so, what's really important about that is that if our brains are constantly evolving, that means that we're capable of evolving. We're capable of evolving as a society, but even more important than that, as an individual. And so for me, I joined this podcast because I wanted to share that with people and share with people the things that they can do every single day in order to influence how their brains evolve and to really sort of take charge of their life and their neurological destiny.
Yeah. So I asked this question: what problem overall, other than just in general, what problem did you see in mass that made it so that you wanted to take up this mantle or write the first book in the first place?
Yeah. So for me, I'm a neurologist, right? So I treat people who have brain disorders, mental health issues, even medical issues. And one of the things that I was seeing is that most of the times, if somebody's coming to me with some neurological problem, yes, medication might be able to help, but it doesn't, take away the underlying issue. And in order to really help the underlying problem, it was about changing the way that people think about their life and their health. And it was also about the things that people do every single day, the lifestyles that they were living. Right. So if we take something like Alzheimer's disease, right? So a lot of people that come to me, they're terrified of developing Alzheimer's disease. But one of the biggest myths about Alzheimer's is that there's nothing you can do about it. The reality is that Alzheimer's is a lifestyle disease. So the things that you were doing in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s influences whether you're going to develop Alzheimer's later on in life. If you're not getting enough sleep, that can potentially cause you to get Alzheimer's later on in life. Because when you are sleeping, especially entering the deeper stages of sleep, that's when your brain is clearing all the toxins that have built up throughout the day. That's when your brain is making new neurons and new connections, right? Exercise is really important. It's probably one of the most important things that you can do to maintain your brain health. What the foods that you're eating are incredibly important. Minimizing the stress, constantly learning, constantly challenging yourself in different ways, all of that has a significant influence on whether or not you can potentially develop a dementia like Alzheimer's disease.
It's interesting. So how do you go about, I guess, in phase two of your health? Because you're a neurologist, and so I'm sure you're meeting people in the medical world. What are you doing today in order to help people, you know, take that next step of that next step of control?
Yeah. So, I really like certainly working with people who have medical, mental, or neurological issues going on.
Mhm.
But I also like working with people who are trying to accomplish big goals, who have big dreams for their future. Because the reality is, in order for us to overcome challenges in our lives, in order for us to accomplish the goals that we set, it all starts in here. It all starts in our brains, right? It all starts in the way that we think about our own lives and what we're capable of. And one of the things that we are constantly seeing is that people are tend to be very negative. The conversations that they have with themselves, the things that they say to themselves are often very negative. It's about their sort of limiting beliefs and teaching people um, that if they change the way that they think about things, that's going to change the actions that they take, and that's going to change the results that they're getting. So that's a really big thing for me.
Hmm. Is there any I know people may have already heard your story to some degree, but I want if you can give a quick recap of your story of how you even got to this point. How did you become a doctor?
Yeah, so part of my story involves the fact that I've been a patient since I was 18 years old. So I've been a patient my entire adult life. Been a patient for more than 20 years. I was diagnosed with kidney disease when I was 18, when I was a freshman in college. I had my first kidney transplant at 28, 8 days after graduating medical school. I had a second kidney transplant last year after being hospitalized with COVID for 2 weeks, ending up on dialysis for several months, and I was blessed again to get another kidney transplant. So part of my story is really about the fact that I am both patient and doctor, and I use both my personal and professional experience to really help people, like I said, overcome their health challenges, but also just accomplish really big goals. Right? I mean, I went through kidney failure in college and medical school, and because of my the way that I thought about things, because of my perspective, I was still able to accomplish those kind of goals.
Hmm. Interesting. So when I hear your story about getting into the having to have a kidney, especially when you were young, I think about the Denzel movie John Q. I don't know if anybody remembers that movie about how he wanted to save his son because his son needed a transplant of some sort. But anyways, I'm sure that was a scary time for you. How were you able to keep kind of positive, with the life and death that kind of was it hanging in the balance for you where you could kind of like get past the negative self talk that you have or that could come up? How did you get past that?
Yeah, so facing your mortality is certainly not easy, and the way that I dealt with it in my 20s is very different than the way that I dealt with it last year
Yeah.
at 42 years old, right? So in my 20s, it was certainly felt like a nuisance. I certainly at points was really angry, um, but I there was always a bigger sort of picture, right?
Mhm.
It was like, oh, I need to get through college. I want to be a doctor. I need to get through medical school. So that really took the focus, and it was very more selfish sort of goals that got me through because I was just focused on those things. You know, at 42, what helped me get through was, again, I had a much bigger perspective, a larger vision that I focused on, but it was
Right.
more about other people. It was about, well, I want to get through this and I want to be impactful. I want to help other people, you know, create the life that they want for themselves. I want to help other people get healthy. I want to help other people accomplish their own dreams in life. It was also about, look, I've got two boys who need their father, right? So it was really about doing for others, having a vision of doing for others that helped me get through it this last time.
Well, that's dope. I wonder if if well, I don't wonder. I'm gonna ask the question this. If 42-year-old waiting for a kidney patient Philippe had to talk to, younger waiting for a kidney Philippe, What would he tell himself?
I think he would say, look, it is going to be okay. You are going to experience some significant challenges in life, but you're going to find a way to overcome those challenges. Um, I think I would tell that younger version of myself, make sure that you surround yourself with the people who love you, because it's the people who love you that will save your life. So when I was 28, I was blessed because my kidney donor was my dad, right? When at the age of 42, again, I was blessed because my kidney donor was not even somebody who was blood related to me. My kidney donor was my cousin-in-law, Scott. So I had these two men who loved me, who believe in me, who, know that I can be impactful and help a whole bunch of people that were like, his life is worth saving.
All right, so let's transition to how you help people. So I know I've read the book. That's how me and you met. Um, but how do you tend, or what are you giving to people that they get to take for themselves? What are you offering up?
Yeah, so I am giving them their power and their freedom back. I think it's really about teaching them how to hack their brain in order to overcome, in order to live the healthiest life that they can potentially live, in order for them to achieve the goals that they so desperately want to achieve, right? And knowing how the brain works, and passing that off to other people has really helped them tremendously. Like I've been able to help people, you know, a, a, a wannabe mom, a woman who desperately wanted to have children but who couldn't have children. But because of our conversations, because of the strategies that I taught her, she was able to get pregnant. I was able to help somebody with epilepsy overcome that and become a musician and start putting his music out. I was able to help a police officer who was constantly having seizures, transitioned from that line of work, get his seizures under much better control, and now create a new business all for himself. So it's really about teaching people how to overcome the challenges that they're facing, and despite those challenges, taking the lessons that they've learned from that and now creating the life that they truly want for themselves.
Okay, so you talked about in general like how the brain works, but give me some, I guess, your view of how the brain works, because I'm sure it's different than my view of how the brain works, or at least how we
Yeah.
talk about it, but how it works. But what do you, when you say how the brain works, what do you mean by that?
So the first job that your brain has, its primary responsibility is to keep you safe, right? It's to
Okay.
enhance your survival, make sure that you're going to survive for as long as possible. But in order to do that, the brain tends to lean towards the negative, right? So negative thoughts tend to keep us safer, right? If I can look at somebody and very quickly determine if that person is going to be safe for me to approach or they're going to be dangerous for me to approach, that enhances my survival, right? And that's where a lot of our stereotypes and biases sort of come in because our brain wants to make very quick decisions. Well, sometimes that hurts us, right? Um, and so it's about teaching people that, yes, you're going to have negative thoughts because your brain wants to keep you safe. But the fact that you are aware of the thoughts that you're having suggests that you are not your brain, that there's a higher level of consciousness that you have, that you can now sort of take charge of your brain, lead it down the path that you want to go. So that way you can create the life and the experiences that you want for yourself. The fact that our brains are constantly changing and evolving means that you're capable of changing and evolving. Like I don't believe in staying in the same job for 30, 40 years, right?
Mm.
I see a lot of
Yeah.
people who will stay in the same job for 30, 40 years if they're lucky enough to make it to retirement. So I'm a doctor, so I know that a lot of people pass away before they retire, but if you're lucky enough to make it to retirement and you're lucky enough that when you do retire, you still have a strong and healthy body because a lot of people don't. Um, that the reality is a lot of times we start seeing people develop things like dementia because they never taught their brains anything new for the last 30 or 40 years. They just did the same things over and over again.
Over and over.
Right.
So let me jump in here real fast and talk about that that higher conscious version of yourself, kind of noticing your thoughts. So I wonder, all right, so when it comes to controlling that, um, what's your viewpoint? Because I know it's gonna be different. Maybe it's not different. It's just how we address the issue, maybe different. So But when you're controlling those high level thoughts, there's I guess, a known kind of theory out there that kind of separates us. And this is just a simplification of kind of what's happening from a psychological standpoint, like a system one and a kind of a system two kind of movement on what you can control. And I guess if I had to pick which one really is that higher consciousness, that's system two, that's you, right? And you'd like to control more of system one, but you're really a combination of both things, right? So the things that you system one being the things that kind of automatically kind of put you in certain positions based off of just how you generally kind of move. Some of that nature part of you, and the nurture part of you could be a little bit more of the system two, but you really can't separate them. But for the sake of the example, we're going to. So when it comes to adjusting, which part are you trying to adjust? Both, or system one or system two, or how do you look at that and what you're trying to and what you deliver?
I think you're trying to adjust the way that you think about things, right? But these
Mhm.
negative thoughts are always going to creep in, and I think that the reality is that we have to not be so hard on ourselves, right? We have to
Yeah,
not be so judgmental. And so when I think of being mindful, it's about being present in the moment. It's about being aware of what's going on, but it's about doing so without judgment, right? So a lot of people would say, okay, I'm having negative thoughts. I don't want any negative thoughts to creep in, right? They might sit in quietness and negative thoughts will come through and they'll be like, oh, God damn it. Another negative thought came through. And I'd be like, let that negative thought come through and let it pass on. Right? You get to decide what you want to focus on.
yeah,
The reality is that millions of things are competing for our attention every single day, and we're not even aware of it. Right? But you are capable of deciding what it is that you want to focus on. Do you want to focus on the negative or do you want to focus on the positive? Because no matter what you choose, from your brain's perspective, there's no good or bad. No matter
no,
what
you're
you
right about
choose,
that.
though, right? Your brain is going to try to prove you right. So if you focus on the negative, your brain is going to show you things that are negative that sort of prove right whatever story that you are now creating in your mind. But if you focus
Yeah.
on the positive, your brain is going to do the same thing there also.
Yeah. What I would say when it comes to that system one, system two stuff, right? The system one being more that automatic processing, where you would probably see more negative thoughts maybe come through. I don't know, this is a generalization of the way that we kind of think and process thoughts. But system two being your ability to try to control what's happening. I would say that you kind of, just like anything else, you can succumb to, like, the strength that you've kind of put into yourself, right? So a person who's in better shape tends to be able to run a longer race than a person who's out of shape, right? So I believe that there's uh some forms or some ways, as you say, in the practicing of thinking, right, that helps you think even better. And I think that sometimes the exercising of the different modalities or the different types of ways that you kind of go about that, or a person can go about that, that may vary uh, from, I guess, accomplishment to accomplishment. But I wanted to jump back into, for you, or at least ask this question of you, is, so what's the latest things that you're delivering? What do you got out here that you're helping people with, tool wise, that they can find and navigate to?
Yeah, so certainly you mentioned the book Neuroplasticity, Your Brain Superpower, which people can
Mhm.
find on Amazon, at Barnes and Nobles. I've got an ebook called Change Your Brain, Change Your Life.
Yeah.
I've got a children's illustrated series called Nuri the Neuron, where I created this little neuron character that teaches children's about how they can influence their brain. Um, I've got my online course, Take Charge of Your Brain, where I work with people and really teach them how to hack their brain so that way they can, like I said, overcome challenges and create the lives that they want for themselves.
Mm. I mean, the neuro to neuron one, I'm big when it comes to, like, how do we change society or change what our world's gonna look like. You got to start, like Whitney Houston and those people used to sing, right? I believe the children of the future. You have to teach them well, but in order to really teach them, they got to control their brains, because that is where, uh, getting their brain set up, working from the beginning, from the onset, right, is going to actually help us get to the next thing, or to
Yes.
the next phase of a stronger, I guess, or particular level of evolution. There's a
Well,
there's a show, yeah.
I was going to say, one of the things that I actually tell patients often is you need to start acting like children, right? Because children are constantly moving, so they're constantly exercising, which is great for their brain health, allows their brain to make new neurons and new connections, right?
Hmm.
Children are constantly having new experiences, right? Which again allows their brain to make new neurons and new connections. Children are always using their imagination, which is so critical for how our brains evolve and the way that we evolve, right? So I tell people all the time, like, hey, if you want a template for how you should go about your life, just act like children. You'll exercise, you'll have new experiences, you'll learn new things.
Oh, I thought you were gonna keep going with that. I was looking up the kids and imagination because it made me think about something that I haven't thought about yet, which is kids and how they're kind of performing these days in general. There's so there's two rules of thought here. And the first rule of thought is that, we're not doing a good job trying to teach our kids, which could be true. And number two, you could say that our kids aren't good at learning. Now, I'm a proponent of our kids aren't good at learning. That's where I sit on the fence. Where do you sit on the fence when it comes to that? Since you brought up this
Yeah,
whole
I
the
mean,
kids and their imagination.
I don't think neither of those things are necessarily true. If any of those things are going to be true, I would say it's number one that we're not good at teaching our kids. I think the reality is that we stifle people's creativity, we stifle their learning, right, through our
Well, okay,
educational
so
system.
I have to jump in there because I want to ask this question, or not ask this question, or frame it in this way. If we aren't good at teaching our kids, wouldn't that set them up to be poor learners?
I mean, not necessarily, right? Because they're capable of learning.
Oh
We're
no, no.
just not
Yeah, everybody's capable.
right. But I mean,
I'm not saying that.
do you think it's natural, right, for to put a kid in a classroom for 8 hours a day and try to force feed them information?
No, but that's what we're doing. So it's just that hurts them.
Right.
It's
So
almost like
that's
saying, well,
that's
hold on.
horrible.
So,
That is
so,
horrible.
but that's true. But we've been doing that, and so when you do that for so long, it then affects how these kids can the potential of what they potentially can learn. Almost like if I sat you down, if you're a baby, and said, hey, I'm going to feed you Oreos and cupcakes, and then when you're old enough to really run around, I expect you to be like this fit kid. We would say most likely this is not going to be a fit kid, even though the person is capable of doing fit activities,
Yeah,
right?
but the purpose of our educational system is not to create all these imaginative, well-rounded individuals that are going to go out there and create this amazing future. The purpose of our educational system is to create employees, right? And that's what we start with kids at a very young age. We're essentially putting them on track to create employees that will do whatever jobs we might want them to do, right? Like
Okay.
I was telling my kids the other day,
Mhm.
I was driving them to school, right? 7 o'clock in the morning, right? Drive them to school so they can be at school at 8, so they can sit in the classroom and do whatever work the teacher wants them to do, right? It's the same way. Adults go to their job for 8 or 9 a.m. so they can be in an office and do whatever their bosses tell them to do. We're just starting them at an early age, putting them on track so that they can be good employees,
Yeah,
not so
I
that
mean,
they can be good
I 100%
learners.
agree with that.
It's
But
not about
I'm
being good
saying,
learners.
yeah, yeah, no. But I would say, okay, I'm saying that the effect of that. So the system is a system. We were born in a
Right? So the
system.
system is working the way that it's supposed to. It's just
So yeah,
not working
maybe.
to the benefit of the individual. It's
So
taking us away from our natural state, but it's working the way that it's supposed to.
I would agree with that as well. That it's taken us away from our natural inclination. But my no, it's not really an issue, but I want to point out is that because we're in this state, that we're not going to be able to change right away, right? It's like almost like saying, how do we have better communication without the use of the internet, right? You're not going to have that. So because we have this state, right, then we have to make an adjustment because we're not going to change the school system, at least right now, not this second, right? So what adjustment are we going to make with our kids in order to give them what's being taken away from them, or
Well,
not
that
giving
ends
them
up
as
being an
opportunity?
individual
Yeah,
decision, right?
I agree. You got to make
So,
some choices.
and
That's
you
like,
see you see a lot of people, especially people who have the resources, they don't have their kids in school.
no, you're
They have
right.
their
But I
kids
said,
homeschooled.
yeah, you're right. I even go back to like the way that we eat food. You know, the people who understand that, the way that we eat food is normally not as healthy as for us as it could be. And that's why people who
Yeah.
become vegans or vegetarians seem to live longer, more healthier lives than the rest of us. But, you have to work hard to understand, what it is you're trying to do so that so that you can move on to the next, or at least level up to the next level of performance for yourself.
Yeah, but a lot of these decisions, yes, you have to learn these things along the way, right? But once you do, then you have to make a decision as to what's going to be best for you as the individual and what's going to be best for your children, right?
Right.
I constantly have conversations with my children
Hmm.
about what I don't really care about their grades. They do fine in school, but I don't care about their grades. What I care about is that they have a love for learning, right? If it
Right.
was up to me, I would be homeschooling them because I feel like with me, they would learn so much, right? They would learn
Right.
a different language. They would learn better social skills than they do at school. They would be physically active. Like they would be every day they would be focused on playing some sport, right? They would travel more, right? They would learn different
Mhm.
cultures. They'd learn how to interact with people from different backgrounds. Their network would grow,
Right.
right? As opposed to my youngest son all the time is like, he does not like school. And I'm like, I don't blame you. It's boring, right? Like it is boring. Like
So we
there's
agree.
no real learning. I'm like, what did you learn in school today? Nothing. I'm like, why did I even send you?
So we agree that the school system is not doing our kids a service
No, but it's doing
by making them
exactly
stronger learners.
it's doing
But you're saying it's
exactly what
doing what it's meant to do.
society wants it to do, to
Of
create
course. Well,
future
that's
employees.
a, now that's an interesting thing because I don't know if everybody would agree that that's what it was meant to do. Like
Oh no,
collectively.
listen, because God forbid people now take a look at themselves and say, "Oh my God, I was essentially put on an assembly line to become a future employee." That's it, right?
No, you're
Yeah,
right. I agree.
that would make some people feel very uncomfortable.
Mhm. Now, I would also say that if it stunts your growth, you may not
It
even be able to
always stunts
see
your
that,
growth. It always
huh?
stunts you. It stunts. Definitely, school will stunt your growth.
Yeah, yeah. But I'm saying if it does stunt your growth, then you may not be able to see the thing. Trying to look over that, trying to
Yeah,
look over that fence to see
listen,
that it did that to you.
right, but if everybody that you're around was on the same track, did the same exact thing, you're never gonna realize that. So
Right,
the
it's just
the
the
people
majority
that
of us. You're
point
right.
that right, people that point that out to you, you're gonna be like, "That person's crazy. They don't know
Mm.
what they're talking about."
So we're the brain profits in our podcast. We're trying to point that out to people so they can make some different decisions, especially to the leaders of organizations, to show that if you don't do something about it, you're going to hurt your company inevitably. When it comes to imagination or creativity, I know that one of the things that they say, one of the most recent studies that came out a few years ago, said that adults are 90%, 96% less creative than they were as a kid.
Well,
So
yeah, I mean, look, our school system, our employment, our jobs, it stunts our
it
imagination.
strips us out. That's amazing.
Yeah.
96% less
Listen,
imaginative.
it's amazing, right? So I'm in healthcare, right? So
Right.
there's this legal concept of standard of care, right?
Yeah.
In theory, it is so that way, somebody comes in, you don't have any biases, they get all the same thing that somebody else would get, right? They come in
Hmm.
with a particular problem, they get the same exact care that somebody else would get. That's sort of the theory. We know in medicine there's still plenty of bias, right? So it doesn't necessarily fix that. But what it does do is that it ensures that doctors do not have to think, right? Like I could literally, one patient comes in with this, I give them that. Another patient comes in with the same thing, I give them that. Even though I may know that patient is not going to do well with this particular treatment, despite the fact that the other patient did.
Mm.
But if it takes away the creativity and the imagination, it takes away the art, right? And we've done that in every industry. We have standardized we have standardized freaking tests. Like, does that that ish does not even make sense. Like, you
No,
know?
you're right. You're right. You're right. There's a book that talks about that, which is very interesting because it's on. I think you actually have the book. Uh, The Deep Places is the book.
Mm,
I think you put me on that book. The Deep Places is about a guy who had Lyme disease. Um, and he spent years trying to, get rid of it. I don't even know if he's actually healed from it, but it was about the challenges that he faced with doctors who like couldn't figure out like, beyond the standard of care, like what to do next.
right.
And it's quite an interesting book anyway. So I totally agree with you. But anyways, man, this has been a pretty cool conversation that I think I've had with you. I don't think we've ever talked about it kind of like this. I wonder what's going to be next. What's new? What's popping new?
I mean, well, we're going to be coming out with season 2 of the Brain Profits podcast. So that is
season 2 is
exciting.
new. We got some new stuff in the works. I cannot wait for what we have in store for the people. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. I'm sorry that Stacy couldn't make today's Brain Profits podcast, but it happens. The show must go on. She'll be hopefully at the next one. But anyways, Philippe, man, tell the people where they can find you and your work.
So they can find me on every social media platform, Instagram at Philippe.md, on Facebook, Philippe Douyon MD, LinkedIn. They can go to my website, which is the InleyBrainFitInstitute.com. Shoot, they can even email me at PhilippeDouyon@gmail.com.
Oh man, come on now. You ain't checking all your emails like that.
Listen, if they email me Brain Profits Podcast, I will even send them a free gift, a free digital gift.
Yeah. People, you heard it here first. All right. Well, thank you for being the guest of today's show. Until next time, you know what to do. Later.
See you guys.